Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 10th session of the series Teaching Online. It's about teaching, not technology. My name is José Manuel Villafuerte, and I will be with you today as your host, along with Regional English Language Officer, Dr. Ruth Petzold. We will try to answer your questions and respond to your comments during the session today. Today, our host, Ruth Petzold, will be talking to our presenter, Heather Gaddis, about young adults and university students and how to teach them online. Let's get started. Over to you, Ruth.
Great. Thank you, Jose Manuel. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back. We're very happy to have you join us for this series of webinars. As you know, it was created with Mexico in mind, but we believe it's also helpful for those of you joining us from other countries. And you know that it was designed to help us get through teaching during the pandemic, but maybe it will also be helpful for us in the future if we've discovered that we like teaching online. Please remember to like the Relo Mexico page on Facebook in order to get news about upcoming sessions, as well as resources and tools for English language teaching. As Jose Manuel said, today is the 10th session of our series. And as you can see on our calendar, during our remaining sessions, we will be exploring topics such as teaching university students and adults virtually, which is today's topic. How to do assessment and evaluation online. We'll explore watch parties and American English resources. If you've been with us before, you know you'll be getting great ideas about resources and apps from our experienced panelists. We'd love to know whether this series has helped you adjust to teaching virtually. Please tell us the name of an app, a tool, an activity, anything that you have used, and let us know in the comments. So, as always, today's session will last about 60 minutes. It will aim to help you feel as comfortable teaching in your virtual classroom as you were teaching in your physical classroom. We'll have one presenter, occasionally supported by a second panelist. And I will make sure the panelists hear any questions you might have. So please do put them in the comments section. You can also feel free to share your reactions there or by using the Facebook emojis. And now for today's session, which is teaching young adults and university students online. We'd like to start, as always, with a warm-up question. What is one challenge that you're aware of for young adults learning online? What is one challenge that you're aware of for young adults learning online? Please, if you feel so inclined, share that in the comments section. And in today's session, we'll be hearing about various ways to respond to those challenges in order to help university students and other adult learners. Specifically, we'll be learning about the Samura Model. We'll be connecting technology integration with lesson frameworks. And we'll recognize different types of plagiarism and how to help students avoid them. I'm very pleased to welcome back and reintroduce our presenter today, Heather Gaddis. Heather finished her master's in applied linguistics with a concentration in TESOL in 2008 at Old Dominion University in Virginia, and started her teaching career at Tidewater Community College and Old Dominion's Intensive English program. In August 2009, she moved to Oaxaca, and she taught at the Technological University of Mixteca. From there, she moved to Izmir, Turkey, and started to gain experience integrating technology into English language teaching. Heather went on to complete a master's in educational technology online with Boise State University in Idaho. She returned to Mexico in 2011 and began working as an academic coordinator at a K-12 bilingual school in Querétaro. In 2018, she completed the diploma in teaching English to speakers of other languages through Cambridge English Assessment. Currently, Heather spends her time working on a variety of projects and courses, including coordinating a teacher training course for pre-service teachers, delivering training courses for in-service teachers in Querétaro and the surrounding areas, writing ELT materials, and working as an examiner for international proficiency exams. We are happy to have you back, Heather. Over to you.
Thank you, Ruth. Okay, so I have here some of the challenges that you wrote in the survey that we did at the beginning of this series. And I see that some of you are writing some great ones in the chat as well, so I'll be sure to mention some of those. So when it comes to teaching university students and adults and language academies and other contexts, you guys mentioned several challenges. So the first being low connectivity or lack of access to technology or the internet. This was certainly difficult to deal with as students went back to their homes, sometimes quite far from the university, and they lacked the same access to technology that they had on a university campus. Another challenge was that some students are under a lot of pressure from their other subjects, and so English takes a back seat. It's not so much of a priority for them. So this was definitely the case for some of my students, where I had a student who had to leave early, I think every Tuesday, because one of his other subjects had scheduled a class every single week during my class time. So it's something that we definitely are dealing with. And finally, there are students who reject online learning. And as a result, they don't really want to participate as much online. And I see that some of you are mentioning that as well, student engagement, student participation. My theory and my hope and my experience is starting to show me that we will start to see some of that resistance go away as we move forward in this process and students are more aware of what to expect. Students really did not sign up for online learning at the beginning of this year. And so some of them, I think, felt out of control as we made this change, and it caused them to be less motivated or engaged in the learning process. So in addition to your challenges, I also wanted to point out some considerations when teaching university students and young adults. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, this group has other courses, each with their own demands. And so we, as the English teachers, need to make sure that our course is relevant to their major or to their career, and also be understanding of those other pressures. Another related consideration of this group is that they have many priorities, such as work, classes related to their career, and family, which we also need to keep in mind as we find a balance for homework and other assignments. Next is this group sometimes has their own device to use for online classes. This can be a good thing since they are less likely to be sharing their computer with a sibling, but it may also mean that they are limited to that device and whatever limitations that device has. Next, as this group is a bit older and has gone through some basic education, they carry with them some previous experience learning English. This may work in our favor because we can build on that prior knowledge, but it can also present a challenge for us as students may have decided that they're simply not good at learning languages or good at English, and they feel unmotivated as a result. And then finally, this group is more autonomous and they're making decisions about their own learning and their own lives. So for this reason, it is a bit easier to implement some of the learning management systems as well as approaches like flipped learning that we've discussed in previous sessions. Okay, so in previous sessions, we discussed PICRAT, which was a model for the integration of technology. Today, I'm going to talk about another technology integration model, SAMR. So the Samura model is a framework created by Dr. Ruben Puentedura, and it includes 4 different stages or degrees of technology integration: substitution, augmentation, and then we move above the line to modification and redefinition. So the first 2 stages of substitution and augmentation, there where we are enhancing what we're doing using technology. So we might have students use a word processor with spell check instead of having them write on a piece of paper. The next 2 steps, modification and redefinition, they involve transformation as they take advantage of technology to entirely redesign the learning task. So that's quite a lot to get our heads around. So I just want to give you a question to think over as I start to give you some examples of Samura. What substitutions have you made in your materials since you have been teaching completely online? Have you used any tools that gave you functions you didn't have in the classroom? Have you done any tasks or activities that you hadn't considered possible before? So feel free to share your thoughts in the chat or to just make some notes for your own reflection. So also, before I move on, I want to address why teachers should want to integrate technology into their teaching. As we have addressed throughout this series, the current situation that we are in has forced teachers to use technology in their teaching, whether that be through moving face-to-face sessions to Zoom or using learning management systems to deliver asynchronous content. But as we move forward and into the new normal, whatever that looks like in your country, we also need to start to consider how integrating technology can help us design learning experiences that were previously not possible. So such as collaborative learning or engaging students in new ways by giving them more autonomy and choice in their learning, or differentiating instruction in a way that would be very difficult without technology. This is not about technology or the tool itself. So a topic that we have talked about several times in this series is it's about teaching, not technology. So this is not about using a particular tool. It's about how we use the tool in the design of learning experiences. And another way to think of it is integrating technology into our lessons is a benefit for our students. You might have an adult student who is going back to learning and maybe after a couple of years of working and are finishing a master's degree. And technology is going to be a part of their work lives. So it needs to be a part of their academic lives as well. So the more we can integrate into our lessons, the better prepared our students will be for their futures. So before we dive into the examples of Samura, I also wanted to draw the connection to English teaching methodology because we all are English teachers. So here are a few basic lesson frameworks that we often use as we plan our classes, especially when we work with adults. So the first is a receptive skills lesson, and it involves developing reading or listening skills, such as reading for gist or main idea, or listening for details or attitude. And then there is the development of speaking or writing skills in a productive skills lesson, such as writing a biography or giving a presentation. Finally, grammar is sometimes taught through a traditional presentation, practice, production model, where the teacher presents the grammar using a situation or context, and then gives students exercises to practice the target structure. Or perhaps through a more discovery-based, text-based model that gives students the opportunity to see the target language in the context of a reading or listening. So which skills do you think are the most difficult to develop in an online setting? Do you think there are some skills that are best to do in an asynchronous session, like a Zoom session? Or do you think there are skills that we can help students to develop asynchronously? Okay. So I'm going to use these lesson frameworks as the basis for technology integration with the Samura model. Okay. So first, we're going to talk about Samura and a receptive skills lesson. So in a receptive skills lesson, we give reading or listening comprehension tasks, such as reading for gist or listening for opinion. Okay, if we want to substitute what we typically do in a face-to-face classroom in an online teaching and learning context, we may use a digital version of our course book along with exercises. Or we can have our students practice reading or listening comprehension on a website designed for English language learners. If you use a website like Breaking News English, you can give students readings that are appropriate for their level. You could also show students how to use a free online marker to highlight keywords, much like they would do in the classroom. You can do much the same activities with listening and use a website like the English Listening Library Online and create comprehension exercises based on the listening that you, the teacher, choose. Another great site for this is Randall's ESL Cyber Listening Lab. So when we want to move to augmentation, so incorporate the technology to make something functionally better, we could incorporate the use of online dictionaries to help students read more autonomously, and then have them use those keywords that they found in the text to write a summary. They could then share that summary with other students via Google Doc or a slides presentation. In addition, you could use Google Forms to have students answer questions about the text. A great feature of Google Forms is that it allows you to include images, videos, and links to external resources, along with your reading or listening text. It also allows you to include feedback for each question. So while the feedback is not personalized to each student, you can include clues or reminders based on your knowledge of your students and what you have seen in your classes.
Heather, we have some responses to your question about which skills, which things are better to be taught synchronously and which are okay asynchronously. I think we all can understand why everyone is in favor of doing speaking and listening synchronously. Some have actually said that it's very hard to do it any other way.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, yeah, I see that that speaking maybe is difficult to do, but it would be almost impossible to do asynchronously. So I think we'll look at some ways of maybe combining the both. But yeah, I see some of those comments. So here, what you see on your screen, it is an example of using Google Forms for reading comprehension. So here what I did was I have an open question, a multiple choice question with images as the responses. So you can also include opportunities for students to summarize the reading and then have those summaries available to you when students submit the form. You could use those summaries in several ways, such as having students edit other student summaries or adding missing information, or making them shorter, and focusing only on the most important information from the article. So this is a chance of combining how we develop reading and then writing skills at the same time. Okay. So here's another example of a reading in a Google Doc. And here's what the student is doing, is using an online dictionary to look up the words. So you as the teacher, you could highlight important words in the text that students will likely want to look up because they're important or essential to understand that reading. And then they could use those keywords in order to write a summary. They could look up the keywords using the online dictionary, which is a feature that is found under Tools. So in this case, we're not changing the tasks that students are doing. They're still reading, but here we're using technology to add to that experience to make something a little bit easier, more functional. Okay. So as we move up the Samura ladder or the Samura experience onto the modification stage, we're using technology to redesign the task. So if we have a class focused on developing reading skills, you could ask students to read an article from one point of view or from on one aspect of a topic, and then they could find another article from another point of view or on another aspect of that topic. So you could also consider allowing students to choose from a set of articles so they can find a topic they are motivated by or one that's related to their interest or to their future careers. So a great source of news articles available at different lexile or reading levels is Newsela, which we will see in just a second. And then as we move into the redefinition of the task, you could have students develop a short video a short video summary, using a site like Powtoon to present the different size of the contributions from all of the students or from all of the different articles that were read. Students could even embed questions into the video that their classmates could answer as they interact with it. So as we've seen in previous sessions, Edpuzzle is a great tool to use to embed different types of questions. And here, instead of you doing it, the students are doing it. So here is what Newsela looks like. So as I said, it's a site that has informative or news articles that you can adjust so that they are at your students' level. So here you see a little button at the top. And here right now it says 580L, and that corresponds to a certain reading level or Lexile level. So you can adjust that based on your students' levels, or you could have different students reading the same article, but at their level. So this is a really nice way to differentiate that experience for students. And then from there, once students all have the same information, you could use that information in a productive skills lesson to do a debate or a discussion. And so here's another example of using Google Docs to share a link, in this case, with students that they could read, and then they can use the Explore function, which is also found under Tools, just like the online dictionary. And they can use this to find articles that are related to the original article, but maybe focus on a slightly different aspect or from a different point of view. So as I said before, you could have several different articles available to students so they could choose. And then they will also obviously have the freedom to choose the second article as well. So this original article that I have the link to is about social media use by teenagers. And so students can then choose to look for an article about maybe social media use by other groups of society, such as small children or adults, and then compare and contrast those effects. If you have several students studying one field of study, so when I used to work at La Universidad de Tecnología de la Mixteca, I had a lot of students who were engineers. And so it was really great to bring in engineering material into the classroom. So if you have that, you can take advantage of it when you pick the articles that you're going to use. Okay. So here, this is the tool that I mentioned, Powtoon. And so there are many ways to make videos depending on your level of skill, your time, and what you want to do with the video. But Powtoon is a great way to create short videos, animated videos. So you can import, if you like PowerPoint, you can just create your basic presentation on PowerPoint and then import it into Powtoon kind of as the basis. And then you can add characters, you can add speech, you can add different features to build your scenes in Powtoon so that you can create a little animated video. So this is what a Powtoon video looks like. You may have seen one if you've looked up different instructional videos on YouTube, because you'll see in the corner it says created using Powtoon. And so this is what it looks like. They're short animated videos that you as a teacher can use in the substitution phase to give information, or we can use it in the modification or redefinition phase to let students use videos to express themselves or to summarize a point. So what other ways do you think you could use a tool like Powtoon, or have you used a tool like Powtoon in your classroom? Okay. So now let's switch over to productive skills, so speaking and writing. So at the substitution stage, there are some synchronous and asynchronous tools that you can use. So if you're using Zoom, you can use breakout rooms. WebEx also has breakout rooms, but in a little bit different way. And you can use these to facilitate small group discussions during your live sessions. You can also have students record themselves speaking on a topic. And then they can send you that recording via email or WhatsApp or your learning management system. You can also have students use Google Docs or another word processing program to write a text. So that's what we have for substitution. And then as we move into augmentation, we can take advantage of tools that facilitate collaboration, such as the sharing function in Google Docs to allow for peer editing. If you don't think your students are quite ready to edit each other's documents, and that's okay, depending on their maturity or their language level, it might not be appropriate. You could kind of help them. You could model that process for them by having them use a Google form that guides them through the process of editing. So for example, you could ask students to find the topic sentence of the paragraph or the essay and write it in a Google form. They could then find a part of the text that they find confusing and explain why. So by putting it in this form, they feel less like they're criticizing their classmate and they're just doing something that the teacher asked them to do. And they're also learning about the process of thinking through editing. Another example of augmentation would be to use Google Slides or another platform to create narrated presentations. So if you want to do this in Google Slides, you need to have students create the audio recordings separately. So they could use their phone or they could use a website to record themselves or their computer, and then they can use the insert menu to add them to the presentation. So this is what it looks like. When you insert, so you can see here when I hover over it, a little play for me to play it, and it's 6 seconds long, comes up. So this is what it looks like. So students could put a picture maybe, or you could have a picture and students could insert them narrating or talking about the picture or whatever is on the slide.
So Heather, we have some contributions from our participants. A couple people are actually already using Powtoons and like it. We had a few suggestions for other tools, Prezi Video, Loom, and Zoom, of course, can also do video.
Yeah, Prezi is a great way to make kind of interactive presentations. And you can get, I like the way that it digs into the presentation and you have different levels. Okay, so VoiceThread is another tool that students can use to create multimedia or narrated presentations. So in just a second, I'm going to show you a VoiceThread that I created myself to introduce myself to members of an online class that I took. So just one note, because I know we're always asking, is this free or is this not free? VoiceThread accounts are free, but there are limits to sharing or how many presentations you can have in your account. So if you were only going to use this with students a couple of times throughout the semester, they would be fine. If you were using this on a regular basis, then you would have some issues to work out in terms of payment. Okay. So I'm going to exit here so I can show you. Okay, so this is kind of what a VoiceThread presentation looks like. And so here, what I wanted to show you in particular was you can see on the side who has contributed to it. So I created this, this presentation myself. So you can see this little picture of me. And then I shared it with my classmates, and here's a classmate, and she recorded a message about what I had said in my presentation. So the really good thing about this is that students could work in groups to create a presentation, and then once they share it with their classmates can then give them feedback or comment on things that they really liked in the presentation. Okay. Okay, so now as we move into the modification and redefinition stages, you can see that students are working much more collaboratively and they're being much more self-directed in their learning. This is an essential skill for students' academic careers and workplace success. The first here is to exploit further a platform like Google Docs or Google Slides to have students work collaboratively to write a text. You could also have students share their writings in a group space online, which we're going to see in just a second. And then you can use those texts for all sorts of activities, such as reading comprehension or peer editing. And then finally, as we move up into the redefinitions part, students are starting to publish their writing. It could be for their classmates, the rest of the school, or the world to see, depending on what is appropriate for your situation. And then they're working together to create stories that go beyond text, to include images and videos, which reflects the world that we live in, right? So here we're redesigning the task in a way that allows students to express themselves much more freely and much more creatively. Okay, so here's an example of, sorry, I just realized it's not all full screen. So here's an example of a book or a movie club that I spoke about for redefinition. So what I did was when I set up the Padlet, I set it up with columns. So you see A to E, F to K, L to S, and T to Z. And I did this to help organize the chaos, organize students' contributions a little bit. So students responded to the prompt, which in this case was to write a review about a movie in which the main character responded or acted in a surprising way. And then they posted the review under the column that corresponded to their first initial. So I let students respond or post in the way that they wanted to or that was easiest for them. So for example, when I was working with this group, it was about 40 people. I worked with them yesterday afternoon. So this is fresh off the presses. I had some people who were very comfortable with technology and some people who were not so comfortable with technology. So some people wrote on a piece of paper and put a picture up. Some people created a Google Doc and shared it. So you'll see right now the different ways that people participated. So right now I'm going to go to the Padlet, the live Padlet, so that you can see it. Okay, so this is what it looked like, and you can see that it is indeed fresh 22 hours ago. And here I had the student, so you can see this student, she or he posted a picture of what they had written. Some people just posted directly into Padlet. This person right here posted a Word document. They uploaded a Word document. And so you see there are different ways that you could allow students, depending on their access to technology, their comfort level with technology. So the good thing about Padlet is that while students will have to have some access to technology, this is not something that's going to mean that they need a great internet connection. So it's not a video or a Zoom session that they do need great internet access for. This is something, as long as they can open a basic website, they can just type right into it. Okay. So in this case, like I said, I had the students write about a movie. So what movies have you seen recently? On Netflix, probably, that you would like to recommend or that you would like to write a review about? Okay. Okay, so here is also an example of collaborative writing. So what I did in this case was I organized the students into pairs or trios, and they talked about a movie that they had recently seen, and then they wrote a summary together on a Google Doc that the entire class was contributing to. So I asked them specifically to write 100 to 125 words because my sneaky plan was to then have them rewrite or edit another pair's work to make it 50 to 75 words. So this is a great way to practice writing concise, well-connected summaries. Okay, so I think you can see here clearly one person's contribution, and then down I did the table so that each person had a different area to contribute in, or each pair. Okay, so I do recommend that you put students' name or you number them in some way so that they know where to start, at least the first couple of times you do this type of activity. Okay. Okay, so here's another example of a way you could use Padlet in a slightly more collaborative way, a digital storytelling way. And so what I'm doing here is students could choose a famous person or an invention or a period of history, and then they could create a timeline about that topic. So students are working together to divide the work and then collaborate to use different types of media to tell about the important moments, such as the early years or the professional career of that person. So the next time you create a Padlet, and because I'm sure everybody is creating Padlets by now, I recommend that you check out the different options there are for organizing Padlets. So there are ones where it's just posts, there are ones that are connected like a timeline, and there are some really other really interesting options for that as well. So I see a question in the chat is, do I give them an example? I think that is a great idea, especially if you're working with students, always giving them a model for them to look at, because that shows you what their expectations are. So in the next session, we're going to talk about evaluation and assessment and using rubrics to help communicate those expectations to students, but giving them a model is another way of doing that as well. And it also kind of shows them where to get started, right? So how do you think you could use Padlet to have your students work collaboratively? Okay, so we'll see what people put in the chat. Okay, so now we're going to go on to everyone's favorite, so grammar. And I have also snuck vocabulary in here as well. So at the substitution level, we can use digital worksheets or a digital version of your course book. So there are also sites such as Quizlet and Spelling City that allow you to make your own list of words that students can then practice with doing games and other types of activities. So these tools are something that many teachers were already using before we got into this situation. So what is your favorite internet source of grammar or vocabulary exercises? Okay. And then as we go up to augmentation, we can use videos to take a place of in-person or live explanations of grammar or vocabulary. So the functional advantage that's being added here, so that's what augmentation is, we're adding something that makes it easier or more practical, is that a student can watch the video as many times as he or she wants, and they can stop and pause the video as well. So recently I've been taking French classes, and my teacher would send us videos, and that's what I would do. So you stop and you want to take notes, or you see a part and you're like, hey, what is going on? So I could watch it as many times as I needed to, which is not something that students could do in the classroom, right? And so next, you can use a shared Google Doc to have students read and then correct each other's work. So instead of you always doing the correction, they can check to make sure that the verb is in the right tense, or that they're using the correct possessive pronoun, or whatever grammar topic that you're using. So I think substitution and augmentation, a lot of us were already doing this, but maybe we're trying to be a little bit more resourceful and looking for new resources. So I really hope you guys share your favorite sites in the chat.
Well, we have quite a few fans of Padlet, and with the idea that it's a great way to do storytelling, especially collaborative storytelling. Someone can start, and the rest of the class then adds to the story.
Yeah, I think the beauty of something like Padlet is that we can use it at all levels of SAMR. We can use it to substitute, to augment, to modify, and then to redefine. And it's just so flexible. It's like having a tool in your kitchen that does everything, right? So that's the beauty of Padlet. So here's an example of a flashcard in Quizlet. So this is the site that you can use with your students, mostly for vocabulary at the substitution or augmentation level. So there are some different ways for students to study. So they can just use it as a regular flashcard. There are also things like learn and write and spell, which Quizlet kind of makes a little quiz or a little test for students to self-assess themselves. And then there are some games below, like match and gravity, that make it a little bit more exciting. You can also have students put this on their phones, and you use it as an app that they can play matching and other types of games. So as Wendy talked about in a previous session, you could model this with students, and then they can use this for autonomous learning outside of the classroom or of live sessions. Okay, so then as we go up to modification redefinition when it comes to SAMR and grammar, so we're again giving students more control. So again, you'll see this kind of as we go up, students have more control, more collaboration, more agency. So for modification, we can use gamified learning as a way to engage them in the content. So a really great thing about playing games is the immediate feedback that students get. So it's really difficult for us to give them that immediate feedback to all of the students at once, right? So that's something that Kahoot can do, so they can quickly help them adjust their understanding of a topic. And then finally, as we get up to redefinition, we can encourage students to make their own games about grammar topics, vocabulary, or maybe even trivia, depending on what we're doing in our class. And then an idea that I really liked that I stumbled upon when I was putting this presentation together was finding real world grammar errors. So Facebook is great for this, right? So, if students have contacts or friends in their Facebook or other social media platforms, then what they could do is they could find the mistakes that these people make. So there, and there. Those mistakes are all over the place, right? So this would be a really great way for for students to see that everybody makes mistakes, and two, to see if they can correct those mistakes, even when they're not in the context that we might give them in a classroom. Okay, so you
We
could
have
do.
another. Whoops.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Another suggestion for a collaborative activity, actually making a podcast using the voices of different students in the class, and if you're especially talented, special effects.
Yeah, and I think you would find that maybe you wouldn't even have to be especially talented, because a lot of times students are really into this type of thing, or once you give them that ownership and authorship, they're willing to become experts in certain things. So what I wanted to show you next was Kahoot for anybody who hasn't played it. And one really good thing I discovered about Kahoot was, so you have your Kahoot, you play the Kahoot, and then you get a report, which is great for you as a teacher for assessment. But there's also an option for you to create a new Kahoot just with those questions that your students found most difficult. So maybe in the next time, or when you're reviewing that topic with the students, you just focus on those questions that were most difficult for them. So I think that's a really good feature of Kahoot. Okay. So you may be asking yourself, where do I even get started with something like Samura? Like, maybe you can say, well, substitution, yeah, I know how to, I know how to use some tools to kind of substitute this, but how do I get up the Samura ladder? How am I really using technology for collaboration to redefine the task? So this is the Samura ladder, which is something that Dr. Ruben Puentadora came up with as a way for teachers to be able to get started. So his suggestion is select a unit or a topic, maybe one that you're particularly passionate about, that is the reason you started teaching English. So what's a topic that you really like doing with your students? So the topic I'm going to choose here is writing a review. So you can write a review of many things, right? Students are experiencing the world, different products, and so they definitely have opinions about those products. And so then you might redesign the introduction to the topic at the S, or the substitution level. So an example here is I find a video, or I make a video about writing a review. What are the features of a review? Is it formal or semi-formal? I'm going to use descriptive language in a review. How do I organize a review? So I might make a video or find a video about that, and then I could use Edpuzzle to embed questions in it to draw students' attention to certain aspects of that video. Okay, so that's substituting it for something that is different from me just introducing it in the classroom. And then as I go up the ladder, I can redesign the development, the practicing of the topic at the augmentation and the modification levels. So for this topic of writing a review, I might have students write a first draft in Google Docs, which I can see and I can monitor who's doing what. And then I can get them to do a peer feedback. So they can share the documents with a peer, or I can manage that process, and they can use a checklist. So use descriptive language. Oh, nope, I see a lot of formal language. How can we make it less formal? In order to help each other in their writing. And then they could post the final draft on a Padlet. So just like the one that you just saw with the movie review, I could allow them to post it either as a text, or I could allow them to record themselves and do it as a speaking activity where they read it out loud. They could take a picture, whatever works for your students, or however you want to allow them to inject their own creativity into something. And then finally, to redesign or to create a final assessment or a project at the R, or the redefinition level. So I might have students, now that I have all of this beautiful content all together, have the students maybe organize the movies into categories, and then they could each vote or explain who's the winner of those different categories of movies. So they'll have to read everything, and then they'll have to make justifications and give their opinions about things, about their own writing as well as their peers' writing. Okay, so which topic or unit of instruction would you like to redesign? So what did you do before when you taught this topic that worked for you? And then what would you want to change or replace as you try to integrate technology into it? Okay, so I'm going to give you a second to respond as we switch topics drastically into plagiarism. You might feel like I've change presentations on you, but we are going to talk about plagiarism because it is a common problem that teachers face when we work with this age group. And this is particularly because we may be teaching academic writing or business communication. So while I definitely think that some students plagiarize in an intentional, malicious way, I think there are others who are just not aware that what they're doing is wrong. So I remember very early in my teaching career, I was teaching at a community college in the United States, and I had a B1, so an intermediate student, turn in a short essay. It was a short reflection on a film that we had watched, and I was 100% sure he had plagiarized most of it. So the first part of the essay seemed to be written by him. It had some mistakes. It was at a vocabulary level that I expected from him. And then all of a sudden, then near the end of it, there was this last paragraph that was completely different in style, use of English, everything. I mean, there were words that I had to look up in the dictionary. So when I asked him about it, I asked if he had copied that part. He readily admitted that he had not written that himself, and that he'd got it from somewhere that said something way better than he could have said it. And he obviously did not cite his source. And he was very surprised when I told him that I would have to give him a 0 on that assignment. It was just, I think it was probably one of his first academic classes, and he had never encountered that before. So we often assume that students have been taught about plagiarism at an earlier stage in their academic careers, but this may not always be the case. Because students often, we don't know where they're coming from in terms of their high school. So when we get them in university or somewhere else as adults, that we're getting them from a variety of backgrounds, right? So, and also when they get into university, they're being asked to complete different types of assignments than they were when they were doing, when they were in high school. Maybe they're using research a lot more than they were before. So this is why it's important to review plagiarism and its different variations with students, particularly if you're teaching academic English or if your students are doing research or writing essays. So here are a couple of different types of plagiarism. So the first couple are maybe the worst offenders when it comes to plagiarism. So we have cloning. So this is just where someone takes the entire story, the entire article, and says, yep, that was me. I'm a professional journalist from the New York Times or something like that. So that's an example of cloning, right? I don't know how many of our students do that, but maybe they do the next part, which is copy and pasting. So maybe they're trying to find ideas, they're Googling, and they found this beautiful article, but they know they can't clone, so they can copy and paste part of it. And sometimes you can even see like the background of that text is like a gray or a different color because they didn't reformat it. So this is another example of quite serious plagiarism, right? Where students have just copied and pasted things in. Remixing takes a little bit more work on students' parts. And so this is where they just mixed a lot of different sources together, not cited them properly, but they put it together in a way that maybe it kind of works, but none of the ideas are their ideas. They've just remixed a whole bunch of other people's ideas. Okay. And then, so now as we go down the list, I think the offense of plagiarism gets a little bit less serious, and we can kind of help students overcome this by teaching certain things in the classroom. So the next is finding and replacing. So what finding and replacing is where a student has found maybe a quote or an idea, and they know they need to rephrase it, or they need to say it in a different way. So they just try to find the word in the dictionary or the thesaurus and then replace it. But they don't really do enough to rephrase it or to put it into their own words or to paraphrase it. So next is, so retweeting again is where they're using someone else's words, but they're not really paraphrasing it in an appropriate way. They're really sticking very close to the original author's ideas. And so these two types of plagiarism, we can help this by helping students paraphrase. So saying something using their own words and putting it within the context of the writing. So paraphrasing is a skill that we don't often talk about, but it is something that we assess. We assess students' ability to use vocabulary and grammar to express themselves. So using paraphrasing can help them, one, in their language abilities, and two, avoid plagiarism. So next is citation issues. So this is just where a student has not given full or correct information about a source. And so there we might need to do maybe a workshop on telling students how to cite things properly, and maybe referring them to sources like BibMe, which is a way to create citations and save them as well if you're doing a larger research project. Okay, and then finally, I did want to mention translate. So translate is probably something that your students do a lot. So maybe they use Google Translator, and sometimes this helps them out, but sometimes it just doesn't work out well for them. And so the reason I think we should make students aware that it's not appropriate to translate their paper is, one, it's not helping their language skills, and two, it's not always going to work out for them even in the grading process of writing. But I will say that we do need to recognize that using something like Google Translate can be a tool for students. So we can help them navigate that balance of, okay, I can use Google Translate for quick words or a phrase to help me learn how to say something that maybe I don't know quite how to do on my own, but we shouldn't be copy and pasting our entire paper into Google Translate, because it's just not going to help them in their learning process. So I see that some of you have said copy paste, and so there's a lot of copy and pasting going on, a lot of plagiarism maybe. So what types of plagiarism do you encounter most? Is it copy paste? Is it retweeting? Is it cloning? Do you have students who just clone things and think that you're not going to realize it? Okay. So Google Translate is their favorite, yes. Okay. So I did want to talk very briefly about when we teachers find that we need to do some detective work, and how we can make it just a little bit more difficult for our university students to plagiarize and cheat. So if you suspect a student of plagiarizing, your first step, you can just simply copy and paste some of that paper into Google and see what you get. This may work sometimes for short phrases and things like that, but a better option is to use a plagiarism checker like DupliChecker. So this can check longer text, and it can tell you if a student plagiarized from multiple sources and what percentage of the paper is plagiarized. So many plagiarism checkers have certain limitation for the users, for free users. So they might limit the length or the detail of the report, but your decision to invest in one is going to depend on how much plagiarism you're checking. So another tool that I recently found is Safe Exam Browser. So this is a free tool, and it prevents students from navigating away from an exam. It doesn't prevent them from using their phones, but it does prevent them from navigating away from an exam and opening another window. The one kind of downside or thing that you might want to take into consideration would be it does require both teacher and student to have an account. So my recommendation would be to test it maybe with a small group of students before you decide if it's something that's really worth it. Also, many universities, they use learning management systems like Moodle, Canvas, or Blackboard. And you can also use free learning management systems like Schoology and Google Classroom with your adult students. And in general, these types of systems, they have a quiz or a test function that includes different settings to help you prevent cheating. So one setting is to shuffle or change the order of the questions so that students get slightly different versions of the quiz. And so one time a teacher that I was working with, she did this, and she said it took several quizzes or online homework assignments before students started to realize, because they were just cheating by passing each other the answers, and then some of them would get it wrong. So it's not something that's going to last forever, but it is something that can make it a little bit more difficult, and it's not difficult for you as a teacher. Another thing is to set time limits, and this makes it more difficult for students to take the time to look up the answers and the information. So again, in the next session, we're going to talk a little bit more about these issues around assessment and evaluation. So for example, how can we use the internet to our benefit and not look at it as our enemy when it comes to assessment? Okay. So the last thing I wanted to talk very briefly about was supporting young adults. So one thing I think we assume, maybe not always correctly, is that these students know how to use technology. Yes, they know how to use social media. They are awesome at Instagram. They're awesome at Facebook, but they're not necessarily all that great with technology skills for work or study. So one thing, if you're going to start to use certain tools with them, we need to teach them how to use the tools, at least the first couple of times. They will likely catch on very quickly, but we can't just make that assumption that they know how to use these tools. Another thing is that they come from diverse backgrounds. So if you're teaching at a university, you may have students who have come from very different socioeconomic or very different educational experiences before they got to you. And also with young adults, if you're teaching in a language academy. So this is something that we have to take into account when we need to explore our assumptions about about these students. And finally, a thing that I think we should really strive for when we're teaching young adults is to provide them with external resources. They don't always use them, but you will always have a couple of students who will take advantage of these tools. So I think we should, show them tools like Quizlet, show them tools like Kahoot, websites that we really like, or share with them movies as long as they're appropriate, so that they can share in this language learning and get excited, because when they see that you're excited or that you have used a cool tool, they want to use that tool as well. Okay. So here are some of the new resources that I mentioned. So Padlet was mentioned in a previous webinar, so I only put the new ones here. So we have SAMR. So this is the blog of the Dr. Puentadura who came up with SAMR. There are also lots of SAMR resources online, as this model has been around for several years now. So you can find other things that teachers have written about SAMR, but this is the original. We have Newsela, which was the site with news articles at different reading levels, VoiceThread for presentations, Powtoon for videos, and then DupliChecker for plagiarism checking, and Safe Exam Browser for trying to limit some of that naughty behavior when students are doing online exams. Okay, so I'm going to kick it back to Ruth now.
Thank you, Heather. And thank you very much for this great session on teaching university students and other adults online. I know that you were also watching a little bit the comments and the emoji, so you know we've had lots of happy people today, and also good suggestions coming from our participants.
Okay.
Over the last few sessions, you have seen contributions from several Mexican teachers, and we're really grateful for what they've shared with us. We are sure, though, that you also have wonderful things to share with us. And so we would like to invite you, before this series ends, to submit a great idea that you have, a tip that you'd like to share. Please write it up and submit it along with a photo or two of you in action, and send it to the address that you see on the screen right now. Together with our panelists, we'll review them and maybe share them in an upcoming webinar or on the Relo Mexico Facebook page. And you know that we don't want you just to keep this information for yourself. We encourage you, after the webinar is over today, to share it with your colleagues. We hope that you can perhaps host a watch party. To do that, you would go to Facebook, start a post, and when the box pops up, you click on those 3 dots at the bottom, select Watch Party, and choose this video to publish. Then your friends get a notification, and you can watch the video together and comment midway or all the way at the end as you prefer. And our next session will be with Heather again. And so Heather, please tell us what we'll be talking about.
Yes, thank you, Ruth. So next time we're going to be talking about evaluation. So I'm going to challenge you to think of it as an opportunity and not as a negative right now, considering our online context. So that's what we'll be talking about next time: assessment in this new world.
Indeed. So thank you everyone for joining us again today. We look forward to seeing you in our last week, next week, Monday, June 29th, for our next session. Until then, stay home, stay safe. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.